Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the first annual Pediatric Gaming Technology Symposium. We're so excited to have you here. My name is Abraham Homer. I'm the Gaming Technology Specialist at Children's Hospital Colorado. And today we're going to be talking about virtual and augmented reality for pediatrics.
And I'm Matt Flynn. I'm a certified child life specialist at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center, where I oversee our division's use of patient-facing technology. And let's start off simple. What is virtual reality? There are multiple definitions based on how immersive the experience is. For the purposes of this presentation, we define virtual reality as a completely immersive virtual environment in which the user can interact with virtual elements, objects, and even other players. The use of computer modeling and simulation enables a person to interact with an artificial three-dimensional visual or other sensory environment. And in a typical VR format, a user wearing a headset with a stereoscopic screen views animated images of a simulated environment.
So when we're talking about virtual reality, there's one key difference in the hardware, and that comes down to what we call degrees of freedom, or DOF. Now, there are 3 DOF headsets and 6 DOF headsets. So 3 DOF headsets track your head movement on axes called pitch, yaw, and roll, as you can see in the upper right-hand image. And these allow you to look around a virtual environment, but it doesn't allow you to get up and walk around a virtual environment. 6 DOF headsets, on the other hand, have the same kind of tracking as 3 DOF headsets, but they have an extra layer of tracking on the X, Y, and Z axes, as you can see in the lower right-hand image, that actually allow you to get up and move around a virtual environment. 6 DOF headsets are much more akin to real life movement and lend themselves more to greater immersion. But 3 DOF headsets really have a good place in healthcare. They're really great for shorter procedures, IV starts, blood draws, and it requires a lot less movement and a lot less setup time. And depending on the procedure, they can actually reinforce the need for kids to stay still during certain procedures. 6 DOF headsets are really great for numerous interventions that require full body movement, such as physical and art therapies, in addition to innumerable other non-pharmacological interventions, which we will discuss in a moment. So now that we've talked about virtual reality, we'll kind of define what augmented reality is, or AR. So augmented reality is a technology that superimposes computer-generated images on a user's view of the real world, creating a kind of composite view. The user's view of the real world are enhanced by computer-generated perceptual information, sometimes across multi-sensory modalities, including visual, auditory, and haptic feedbacks. And this can be achieved by either using a smartphone or a head-mounted display. Some of you might be familiar with games like Pokemon Go or even like Snapchat filters, all of which are considered augmented reality. And AR continues to evolve and develop and is becoming more and more prevalent within our daily lives. And as the technology develops, we'll start seeing AR being used more and more in healthcare and in our lives at large with the advent of hardware such as smart glasses and other wearables.
Now, the thing that I like so much about VR is when people try it for the first time. I never get tired of this. And when we use it for the first time, we all have this idea in our minds of what it must look and feel like. And most people tell me how it wasn't at all what they thought it was. And so with that, I want to share with you a video of a coworker of mine who was really interested to learn more about VR and agreed to trial it. And so This is her using VR for the very first time, and she's playing a game called Richie's Plank Experience. And for those not familiar with this, it's a game that places you on top of a skyscraper outside, and the only objective is to walk off of a building onto a thin plank of wood and observe your surroundings.
Whoa!
And now take a step forward. And make sure you stay balanced in the center of that plank.
And I'm not doing anything with my buttons right now.
Nope, nothing with your buttons. It's just
Holy
walking.
Lord.
It's just walking.
This is insane.
So walk out and enjoy the beautiful city view.
I can't.
Yes, you can.
Yes, I can.
Yes, you can. You've
My
gone
God.
skydiving.
I've
You're
been
fine.
skydiving.
Come on.
14,000 feet. Oh my
Right.
God. I have to take the first step. What?
Yep. Go ahead.
I'm going to look for. I am going to fall.
Go ahead. Then just mind the helicopter coming.
Oh gosh.
Oh my God. I'm on the plank and I'm over.
Look around. You can enjoy the view.
How easier said than done, you monster.
So she went to that with the most open mind. She was not against this at all. She was excited. She was ready. And she thought she knew what it was and what it would feel like. And as it turned out, she was not prepared at all. And the purpose of seeing that is it goes to show how easily VR can take the user out of one reality and make them feel like they're experiencing another, which is the whole point of this. And with that, VR can be used to help with normalization, pain management, procedural preparation and support. It can be used to co-treat with PT and OT, with art therapy, and it can even be used as social VR for sibling visits. When utilizing VR during procedural support, you want to make sure that it is being used safely. I have successfully used VR to support IV placements, blood draws, PICC line placements, dressing changes, port access, and chest tube removals, just to name a few. My general guideline is that so long as the device is not physically in the way of the procedure and the movement required to play the game is not a hindrance, it can be used. For example, if the patient is having a port access, oftentimes you want to make sure that that area is being kept clean, that everyone who's around that's about to access the port isn't about to get pushed or hit. And so if this is a game that requires a lot of head movement, a lot of arm movement, that's probably not the best. But if it's a game that encourages looking in one direction, that would be ideal. And one of my earliest uses of VR was with an 8-year-old who had to have a chest tube removed. And I had them try out the device first. They got really into it. And we came up with a plan together that included the patient not wanting to be told what would happen. And that was their idea. When it came time to have the chest tube removed, the patient didn't even flinch. And it was about 2 minutes later, after the chest tube was pulled and it was all bandaged up and the doctor was nearly done, the patient, still with the headset on, says, "I changed my mind. Can you tell me when you do it?" And my reaction was, "Sorry, buddy, it's done." And they pulled the headset up and looked down and just went, "Wow." And I had a similar experience a few years later with a 20-year-old patient who needed a blood draw. This was a typically developing 20-year-old. They had no problem keeping their arm still. They had tried all types of distraction and relaxation techniques throughout their life. The problem was that they would tense up no matter what. And often it would lead to whoever was trying to find the right vein to not get what they needed. They would tense up, they would bear down, nothing would work. I spoke with the patient, I spoke with the parents, they were all telling me the same thing. And after a conversation, I introduced the idea of VR. And they really liked it, and they found a game that they really liked. And they also decided to come up with the idea of they don't want to be told what's happening, they don't want to know the steps, they want the room to be as quiet as possible. And the game they were playing had a lot of music, so they said, "I'm going to cram the music up as loud as I can, and just as long as everyone's quiet, I think I can get through this." And the one agreement that we also came to was I was going to give them prompts to take deep breaths at different points. I spoke with the vascular access team outside the room. I let them know that the patient would be playing the game on a VR device and that they did not want anyone to give them any explanation of what was going on. Everyone agreed to this. Say nothing, just get it done. The patient was incredibly calm, didn't react to anyone, played their game. I gave them their prompt to take their deep breath, and the blood draw was successful in one attempt. And the parents were sitting off to the side the whole time, and they couldn't believe it. Mom immediately pulled out her phone and was like, I'm buying one. I'm on Amazon. I've got to find one. And when I told the patient, hey, we're done, they too did the same thing as that other kid, pulled off their headset, looked down, and they said they felt nothing. And my favorite part of that is we didn't use any other pain management. We didn't use EMLA. We didn't use J-tip. It was just the out of sight, out of mind aspect of it, because it can be that effective. And co-treating with physical therapy and occupational therapy is among one of the most fun things I feel I get to do at my job. At the heart of being a child life specialist is play, and VR turns something physically demanding into play. And VR can be tailored to each PT/OT goal. It can be used for sitting up in bed, in a chair, or while standing on your own 2 feet. It can be used to work on balance, on bending, on arm movement, on trunk rotation, on leg work, and other things if necessary. And the thing that I notice each patient has said to me without fail when we use VR during these sessions is how quickly time goes by and how it either didn't hurt as much as they thought or it didn't hurt at all. And I'll never forget the patient who said they would do their physical therapy every day if VR was available. And the reason that was so surprising to all of us is this is a patient who not only had been resisting their physical therapy every day, but only had to do it 3 times a week. And now they were saying they would do it every day. And we accommodated that goal and got through things a lot quicker than were originally planned.
So one of the other ways that we can use VR in the hospital is in art therapy sessions. VR has a ton of art therapy applications, from interactive coloring books to immersive painting and sculpting applications. I'm going to show a few videos just to give you an example of some of the applications we use in art therapy sessions. This first video is an example of a VR sculpting application that I use in co-treatments with art therapists, where patients actually get to create 3D sculptures inside a virtual environment, inside a VR headset. The cool thing about this application is whatever they create in VR, whatever they sculpt, they can actually 3D print and create a tangible product at the end of their art making practice. This is really great because it's able to kind of close that conceptual loop of taking an idea, working with your therapist or someone like gaming tech, and taking that idea and creating something and then creating a tangible object that you can then share with other people. The other video that I'm going to show is a painting application. This one is particularly of interest to our art therapists. It has a lot of flexibility. You can change the environments you're in. You can change your brushes and your strokes to have a lot of different effects that are only possible within the context of VR. We've used both of these applications and many others to help kids express themselves in a safe space of their own creation. And it's helped a lot of kids actually extend their therapy sessions and get much more out of it throughout their admission here at the hospital. We've even used these art therapy applications in ways to connect patients with their families or siblings. We've conducted art shows in VR where siblings have either remoted in from off-site or they've been able to jump into the same virtual experience together and share their artwork with one another and really create these really amazing memories and change the narrative of their hospital experience for the better, which is really so. Another way we use VR here at Children's Colorado, I think is really interesting and really exciting. It's kind of a newish way of using VR. It's definitely becoming more and more commonplace as the technology develops. But we use VR for social VR, for social interactions, for sibling visits, and for virtual support groups. So what exactly is social VR? So social VR is a different VR applications that allow individuals in different physical locations to meet up in the same virtual space. Usually this is done through a VR headset, but there are different applications where one person can be in a VR headset, the other person can be in a computer, and they can meet up in various different virtual worlds that can be fantasy-like or very realistic. They can talk to each other, they can play games, do all sorts of really cool stuff. So we use these different applications, and you can see a few photos of different siblings meeting up with each other in VR. We use these applications to allow siblings to connect with one another, especially during the pandemic. We had a lot of visitor restrictions. Siblings were not allowed into the hospital. So a lot of kids were going extended periods of time without seeing their loved ones, their families, their brothers and sisters. So we started leveraging this technology as a way to keep them connected and to continue building those really positive memories, even though they weren't in the same physical space. So again, they can draw together, play games together, do all sorts of cool things together. The other way we use these social VR applications is for virtual support groups. We've been able to facilitate a handful of VR support groups for patients with similar diagnoses, such as cystic fibrosis or new oncology diagnoses. Facilitating such groups in VR gives patients who might be feeling self-conscious or anxious or really shy the space to really express themselves as the avatar of that choice. So that's really important. Kids are able to really embody the person, the creature, whatever they want of their choice that makes them feel comfortable in that space. And we have moderators that can join and remain invisible, or they can join and kind of help guide the discussion along the way. We've received a lot of positive anecdotal evidence from participants and have seen these groups change the ways that patients perceive themselves and their diagnoses and how they perceive kind of their future legacies moving forward. So we're gonna briefly hop over and talk a little bit about AR or augmented reality. So at Children's Colorado, we primarily use augmented reality for burn dressing changes in our burn clinic. We use the AR headset as a distraction technique that allow kids to still see what's going on, but still have those elements of distraction that they can kind of focus on if they're experiencing pain or discomfort. These holographic images range from anything from being able to paint in 3D. You can have vines growing out of the walls and ceiling of the clinic. You can draw funny faces on mom and dad. You can fight robots that are busting out of the walls. It's a really cool and engaging experience for kids. Right now, we are running a research study examining the efficacy of this technology as a distraction method. And we're still not quite done with the study, but along the way, we've been seeing a lot of really promising anecdotal evidence from participants who have said, they've come into the burn clinic before, it's been a really distressing experience, painful experience, and they come in and use VR, and it's a completely different kid almost. They use VR, they can endure the bandage changes, they can endure the pain, and sometimes they don't even want to leave the clinic because they're having so much fun using the VR headset. So it's a very, very interesting, cool use case for this technology.
So pediatric hospitals and child life programs in general get a lot done through networking. And VR is still relatively new. It's at the point now where just about everybody's heard about it, but different programs are kind of only just getting started with using it or thinking about using it. And a question I often get asked anytime somebody reaches out is, who is eligible for virtual reality? What's the criteria? Can you show me the checklist you used? And there isn't one exactly. There's no cross the board, make sure all these things are happening, and that's how you know who will and won't benefit from VR. But like assessing any patient for any potential intervention, VR is used on a case-by-case basis, but there are still good things to know in order to ensure that it's being used safely and to get the most out of it. And you want to be sure that the patient does not have a history of seizures, that they do not currently have a head or a neck injury, that they're not feeling nauseous, and that if they've recently had any type of neurosurgery and have a healing incision anywhere on their head, the headset should not be used. You also want to be sure the patient is being provided choices. We all cope differently, and some cope better from watching a procedure. It tends to be one of the first questions I ask a patient when developing any kind of coping plan. Are you the kind of person that likes to watch, or are you the kind of person that likes to look away? And if they are the kind of person who needs to watch, I don't even bring up VR. It doesn't even become an option. I don't then say, hey, I know you like to look away, or I know you like to watch, but do you want to try this instead? Like, to me, I want to validate and honor their personal coping technique. And you also want to make sure the patient is not easily overwhelmed by bright lights or loud noises, and that they're comfortable with the enclosed feeling that can come with using a virtual reality device. Because even the most innocent of games can be startling in a VR environment, especially to a first-time user. And all that said, all those things taken into consideration, you might find a patient who would absolutely do great with VR. You believe firmly it would help them, and yet they don't want to use it. It's not due to fear, it's not anxiety, they just don't want to. I've come across that situation many times, and I might ask, are you sure? Do you want to try it just once? We don't have to do it during the procedure. You can just kind of get a feel for it. Sometimes they say yes to that, and they still don't want to use it during, and they still don't want to watch what's going on. They just want to cope in a different way. And it's important to know that that is a boundary always worth respecting. A lot of what we've talked about so far has been kind of our own experiences with this technology. And a good thing to know is that there is quite a bit of research to help back all of this up. There have been many research studies conducted and articles published on the effects of VR and AR during physical therapy and occupational therapy sessions, for venipuncture related procedures, and for pain management in general. And we encourage anyone to go look into this research and keep up with it, as it is frequently evolving as the technology itself is evolving. VR devices have come a long way, I would say, just in the last 5 years, but especially in the last 10, 15, 20 years. A great resource that I like to utilize is the Chariot program at Lucile Packard Children's Hospital, Stanford. They've done a lot of research with VR and pain management, and as well as They've accumulated data from other research studies. So it's a kind of a good singular place to get everything from, but there's still a lot out there as well. And what we have looked at has shown us that there are higher success rates for procedures when compared to the standard of care, that patients endorse it as a more positive experience. And one of my favorite things is that functional MRIs have shown that there are large drops in pain-related brain activity when VR is utilized and less pain is reported, which goes to show that this is more than just not looking at it and not feeling it. There's actually a positive impact on how the brain is interpreting pain signals. And I think that's a kind of a very, very powerful thing to say that VR is able to do.
So now that we've talked about kind of the different ways that VR can be used in healthcare, I'm going to talk a little about the neurological phenomenon that happen, similar to what Matt was just talking about, how your brain actually reacts to this technology and why it's such a great technology for healthcare. So in order for VR to be effective, you have to have this sense of immersion. So immersion in VR is defined as the perception of being physically and mentally present in a virtual world. This perception is created by surrounding the user of the VR system in images, sounds, or other stimuli that provide an engrossing total environment. Again, immersion is kind of the key to making VR effective for these interventions and procedure supports. Without being immersed in the world, it's not going to have the same effect. There are different kinds of immersion that happen in VR. And the first one that tends to happen is this sense of cognitive immersion. Cognitive immersion is characterized as a condition of profound participation and involvement with software as it relates to the user's individual mental processes. Essentially, most of us think of this as a flow state, or a state where you're just focused on that focal task that's right in front of you. Cognitive immersion can occur more quickly the more engrossing the virtual environment is, and can occur more quickly just because of the context of the technology itself. So the other level of immersion is this physiological immersion. So physiological immersion is a decreased physical connection to the real world and an increased physical involvement with the virtual world. Physiological immersion is caused through visual, auditory, and haptic cues in a virtual environment. So this physiological immersion is what makes VR such a viable tool for interventions that require full body movement, like we talked about earlier, such as art therapies, physical therapies, what have you. And like Matt was saying, this physical immersion makes it a viable and effective non-pharmacological intervention for pain management, because literally your brain does not have the bandwidth to process all of the pain signals that it's experiencing, which is pretty amazing. So now we're going to talk about this phenomenon that's particular to VR that I find just extremely fascinating. It's the use of haptics and what happens with what's called supersensory proprioception. That'll be your fancy new word to impress your friends. So haptics, some of you are familiar with haptics who play video games, but essentially haptics is the use of technology that simulates the senses of touch and motion in an interactive experience such as video games or VR. Haptics is very prevalent in contemporary video game technology. One good example is like the way a video game controller vibrates to simulate the rumble of an engine in a driving game. And more advanced haptic feedback is becoming more and more commonplace, especially with these next generation of gaming consoles. like the PS5's adaptive triggers on the DualSense controller, where the force of the triggers and the vibrations can actually approximate different textures, different stuff that you're walking on. You can tell the difference between walking in grass or walking on a hard surface, or maybe the weight of something that your character is holding. So those things, those haptics, just add to the immersion, especially within something like virtual reality. Now, proprioception is your body's ability to sense the stimuli arising within the body regarding position, motion, and equilibrium. The way I like to think about proprioception is if my eyes are closed or if I'm blindfolded and I have my hand above my head, or if I move it to my side, I still know where my hand is without having to see it for myself. Now, supersensory proprioception is a fascinating phenomenon that happens in virtual reality when all of these elements of immersion are combined with the haptic feedback to create this whole new sensation within your brain. So supersensory proprioception occurs when virtual stimuli from haptic feedback or synthetic virtual environmental factors causes the brain to believe it is physically in a different environment while perceiving sensations and tactility that are not real and exist solely in the virtual world. Virtual reality actually can override the proprioceptors in your nervous system and cause the user to feel sensations that are not actually occurring in the real world. I just think that is amazing and just shows the power of this technology. So essentially, if you're in a virtual world that is frozen, your body will actually start to convince you that you're feeling sensations of cold. Now in healthcare, and especially within pediatric healthcare, we can leverage this phenomenon in so many different ways, like we touched on earlier. But as the technology gets better and better, we'll be able to push this immersion to the point where kids might not be able to feel anything that's happening to them. No pain, they'll be completely immersed. And at times it might supplant things like pain medication, anesthesia, stuff like that. We're not quite there yet, but it's moving in that direction, which is a really, really cool prospect.
I just want to add to kind of go with your point, Abe. I've used different VR games that simulate deep sea diving, and I've had multiple kids that I've caught holding their breath.
Yep.
They don't realize they're not underwater.
That's what's so interesting about this supersensory proprioception is it's totally involuntary. It's just happening within your body's nervous system. And
Yep.
for kids, I mean, it's such a easy transition for them to make.
Yeah. And so lastly, some things to consider. We've mentioned some of this. It's always good to repeat. Always provide choice to increase the patient's sense of control. Control equals coping, and coping is what we're looking for. You want to find games that minimize menus, or you could even load a game up for a patient yourself, skip the menus entirely, get right to the part that they're going to engage with and be immersed with. If this is a first-time user, simpler games are probably better. You want to remind the patient that they have the option to stop at any time. It doesn't matter if it's just for a normalizing play experience, if it's in the middle of a procedure, if it's for pain management, if it's for one of their PT/OT sessions. If they want to stop, they get to stop. And maybe the most important thing is work with your infection control team to create an appropriate cleaning protocol. We all want to be within each of our medical center and hospitals cleaning guidelines. Every hospital is a little bit different. So if you can work with your infection control team and get the right guidelines going, that would be best to ensure your success with using this technology going forward. And so here are our references. And this is the time where we would say, does anybody have any questions? We'd be happy to answer them.
I love VR so much. It's the best. I heard someone say next year it's going to be in the Oasis. I'm all for that. Going to have the conference in the metaverse. I think that would be awesome. Kirsten, I saw your hand pop up. Let's see, Garrett's asking, what's your favorite VR game? Ooh, that's a tough one.
I mean, I don't get tired of putting people in Richie's blank experience. Like, just, it never gets old. I've had people who they've seen others play, and they go, okay, I can do this. I know what this is. They pop that headset on, the elevator doors open, and they nope right out of there. They're like, I thought I knew what it was. It's not happening.
Yep, that's a fun one.
Nightmare mode.
Chris loves nightmare mode.
Oh, yeah.
My favorite game personally is Half-Life Alyx. I think it's an amazing AAA VR game that is super detailed. I've even seen videos of like math teachers running their classes in VR with being able to write on the windows with marker and stuff. And then in the hospital, I'd probably say Tilt Brush or the Sculpt game are pretty cool. And then we have a question, what headsets do you primarily use? I would like to look into Oculus, but I'm wary of the Facebook requirements. So this is kind of a big sticking point, I think, within the community, is if you can use a Quest 2 and get past the Facebook, that's a great one. Some hospitals aren't able to get past the Facebook. So I think they utilize PSVR or the Rift. Matt, what do you use at your hospital primarily?
So we utilize the Starlight Experience ones for procedure support, or sometimes like transitioning from procedure support. And then for kind of the more immersive ones, we use the PlayStation VR. And so that one is set up on a cart, so it's all mobile. It's gotten to the point where I can have it set up in 2 minutes or less. And I really think it kind of depends on, how much a person is willing to set up. How mobile can you make it? How quickly can you get it in and out of a room? Things like that are good things to consider when looking at what kind of headset you want to get for yourself.
Are there specific games, apps that you use for virtual support groups or sibling visits? So for the virtual support groups that we used, we partnered with AltSpace, which is a big social VR platform, and they were able to create private rooms for us, so no one could hop in unnecessarily, and we could have moderators and stuff. So they were a really great resource. But there's tons of different social VR platforms. There's also specific platforms for virtual support groups. I think Dr. Asher Marks might actually talk about that after the break as well. Can you talk more about VR, AR game design? Are you creating custom games or using existing games? Both. We're trying to do both.
Yeah, we're predominantly using existing games. We did create a virtual reality walkthrough of going for an MRI, using images from our own hospital. So it like starts you in the lobby, it takes you through the hallway, it takes you through like the different levels of getting closer to the magnet, it takes you through like getting wanded, putting you in the room with the MRI machine, putting you flat in the bed, and even into the scanner, and we'll even play the scanner sounds. We set that up to be used as a prep in our radiology area, and we got it all finished and set up. And then COVID happened, and that made that particular headset much more difficult to like get past our infection control protocols because of the foam on it. So we're still kind of working around that, so we don't have as much like data and feedback on that as we would like.